guys, can you please introduce yourselves and introduce also your interaction within the DeFi space? Let's start with Musa. As Musa, you were the first in the beginning of the stream.
Absolutely. My name is Musa Sulejmani. I'm a software engineer. I'm heading up software engineering at Return Network. Return Network is what's dubbed as the AntiBank. So we want to pioneer like the DeFi space into the mainstream market by allowing everyday people to put their money to work for them and earn 6.25% on their money. We're getting ready for launch soon, and you can sign up for early access at return.network.
Wonderful. Barbara, what about you?
Yes, I'm with the Women's Innovation Fund Accelerator. We do gender balanced C-level funding for emerging tech companies. We use acceleration to help facilitate that. So what we're doing here is we're about to roll this out this week is something called the Noadex, and that is actually going to be one of the world's first blockchain carbon registries where you can purchase carbon credits and or offsets on the blockchain. So we're in the process of rolling that out this week.
Wonderful. Social applications. That's really great. Doug, what about you?
Hi there. Yeah, I'm Doug Hoyte, and I'm the lead developer and one of the founders of Degens, which is a blockchain-based betting exchange similar to Betfair and centralized alternatives like that. I've built a few different dApps before. Degens is, my most successful one, and that's about it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so we are here experiencing the incredible growth of the DeFi market. During the lockdown period, the COVID crisis, it actually, tripled in value. So what, in your opinion, is this killer mainstream application that will keep pushing forward the DeFi space in the next year or so? Musa, what is your opinion on that?
Well, I don't know who tuned in to the talk earlier, but there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes that's enabling this kind of mainstream approach to happen. And the more the market kind of matures and more systems that are built on top of DeFi, then it just makes a more seamless experience for everyday people. And I think as really any market matures, technology kind of follows to cater to the least tech savvy. So I think that's probably the most interesting application right now.
Interesting. Barbara, what about you? Of course, you're working with the social applications that are incredible and very important. But do you think that they are also able to push mainstream adoption of the technology?
100%. I mean, if you look at what's happening as far as like Google just bonded out $5 billion for an ESG bond. That is for sustainability. Amazon, Jeff Bezos has created a whole entire fund, $3 billion around ESG sustainability. So why are Apple just announced maybe a couple of weeks ago, we're spending $2 billion to make sure that we're zero carbon. Why is that? Are they just doing this for, they're not just doing this for fun. So what applications are going to be rolled out? They're doing it from a consumer perspective. So if you think about the next generation of consumers, or the consumers that are going to have this as kind of normal, a lot of these millennials and younger are very much more conscientious about environmental sustainable issues. And therefore, that's why all this type of money is getting deployed to those areas. So how do you make it simple? You make it simple just like there are things that are simple out in the world. I mean, I love my Starbucks app. I always use this as an example. That's a very simple use case, but it You can like pay money with it, you get rewards with it, it has a map in there, but it's widely adopted, even just inside of Starbucks. So if you think about use cases, you have to keep it as simple as possible for the end user so they don't have that friction, but it can still be built on top of this very sophisticated DAOs or blockchains or other types of technologies.
As simple as possible. I like that a lot. Doug, what other prerequisites do you think are important for an application to become mainstream?
Oh, yeah, simplicity is definitely important. Also, general ease of use. Probably anyone who's interacted with dApps as they exist today has used MetaMask or one of these equivalent wallets. Those are some of our biggest onboarding challenges to getting people to, number one, download these things, and number two, figure out how to use them. Our particular dApp is built on Ethereum, so it has the concept of paying for gas and the concept of nonces, where transactions need to be mined in sequence. And these are big stumbling blocks for our users. Additionally, related to that, gas is extremely high right now, as probably most people watching are aware of. Even interacting with a smart contract right now is going to cost several dollars, and if it's complicated, it could cost even more. So that is a big barrier to entry for a lot of these applications that don't necessarily deliver that amount of value for every interaction. In terms of benefits, or like you were asking about applications that will take off in the future, I think any application where transparency is going to be a big driver will be solved quite well by blockchain applications, because typically when you interact with a centralized application, you aren't aware of what's happening under the covers. You can't go into the database and look at what is actually getting done. You can't verify that steps are getting followed in the order that they should be followed, and so forth. Whereas in decentralized applications, you really do have that guarantee. You can go onto Etherscan or ideally run your own nodes and verify everything is happening as it should be.
Yeah, indeed, for sure. So let's elaborate a little bit. Which exactly applications would this be? Like now, of course, we have these borrowing and lending platforms that are occupying the majority of the DeFi space. Do you think that it still be growing as the main application of the DeFi technology, or there will be other leaders in the space? Who would like to comment?
I think this is like the beginning. If you think about the beginning of anything, it's early still. So what other types of platforms can surface? Like, Doug has kind of like, I went and looked at everybody's software, like a game. So like in my mind, gaming could be very huge because gaming is very non-threatening to people. It's easy to interact with. You can create a nice interface. You can kind of hide some of the complexity. And then a blockchain can just be empowering that, but then no one really knows like it's there. And I think, lending is great. That's what Musa is doing. And I think that's like the first generation. It's kind of like crossing the chasm if you think about it that way. Like you have your early adopters, your very, very early ones, and we're still in the early adoption phase. And then you kind of get some more people, and we're really talking about like how do we start crossing the chasm. And I think we're still early in the early adopters phase of many of these types of DeFi and DAO technology conversations.
Yeah,
I totally agree. That's great, Musa. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about gaming. That it was actually incredible that we've heard about gaming first from a woman. I would like to ask you, Musa, Doug, what about gaming for you? It definitely has an incredible potential.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just comes down to like how can we make it as simple as buying tokens in in like Candy Crush, right? Because it just comes down to the end user. If we do want like DeFi and crypto to ink into the mainstream where, mom's driving her minivan and the kids are in the back of the car, we have to think about those people if we want mass adoption of crypto, right? So if we have to build technologies that can adapt to the lowest common denominator. So in gaming, there was like a ton of dApps coming out for like gambling, right? But that's not the mainstream user. That's a specific niche use case. So again, kind of keeping in mind who is that suburban mom using the technology, and keeping that end user in mind. How can we build the infrastructure for those people?
Yeah, that's very important. So we are talking about user experience, and in user experience, there is user, and there is designer and software engineer who produces this software for the user. And definitely we are talking about an industry that is very young. I would like to ask you about a wide community education within the DeFi space. What would you recommend for the community to develop their skills in the DeFi space as users, but also as producers, as those who apply their knowledge to build up new products?
Well, so there's a lot of different ways to get into it, and it really depends on your interest. Again, we also have to look at if mass adoption is really the primary goal. I mean, there's certain things that are always going to be niche, and I think people are trying to do what they call yield farming, and a lot of day trading on tokens and stuff. It's never going to be as popular as, for example, email, right? Decentralization has its limits, and it has particular things that it'll be better at being applied for. So really we have to ask is if we want to get every single person using Ethereum smart contracts directly, and does that make sense? Or is it more for particular applications and people that in certain situations want a lot more transparency or guarantee or censorship resistance? In terms of learning and getting into it, as I said, it depends on your interests, but I think one of the easiest ways is to try to use things like Uniswap and other decentralized apps that already exist, and understand how your transactions are processed. And then if you're inclined, go read the source code behind them, because that's the beauty of it. All this stuff is that it's all open and you can figure out how it works. So that would be my recommendation. Start using apps.
I really like that. It's like, back in the 80s, like, hey, the technology exists in a business application, right? And then those that are interested in the technology would build their own personal computers, right? And then like Apple, for example, came along and they're like, our mission is to build a computer for everyone, like a computer in their home. So kind of keeping that in mind and going off what Doug said, like, obviously keep that end user in mind, and those that are interested, they're going to jump into the source code and build on top of it themselves. But create technologies that are so easy that everyone can use them, and those that are interested will eventually gravitate towards building on top of what exists.
I look at it a little differently. I think the blockchain will be all infrastructure. So just like we have cloud now, and we're on this cloud conversation, that's how I see a blockchain. So then what then do you need to do to then differentiate yourself as a company and as a creator of blockchain or dApps? This is now kind of where Doug and Musa, I agree with you. Like, yeah, if you want to get way down in the weeds, that's great. But there are a lot of people that, if we're talking about mass adoption, don't really want to learn how to code at those levels, because it can be very sophisticated. It's very complex. It's a lot of encryption, a lot of, there's a lot of things going on inside of a blockchain. So, and then what types of blockchains, and then how you create nodes, how do you really make distributed things? It's many, many things around that. So the one thing to do is educate yourself about what this technology is, and then see how you potentially, hopefully that's not me too. Then see how you want to utilize it, participate in the ecosystem, or what you would like to do, because we need more than just developers. We need kind of all types of people. I mean, we need UI UX people, we need DevOps people, we need marketing people, we need CEOs, we need all different types of people in this ecosystem. So it's not just stuck to developers.
There's a lot of resources out there right now. Like my friend who's watching just texted me, and DeFi Pulse. I don't know if a lot of people will go on there, but I've been on there probably daily the last couple months. And also Cointelegraph has been publishing some great material all of this year and last year on on DeFi. So just kind of keeping up with the news and looking at resources that are kind of catered to beginners also.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would also like to develop this point that Doug mentioned, that actually decentralization has its limits. And it does mean that also legacy finance is still here. So my question to you would be, what do you think we should borrow in terms of knowledge, skills, and maybe mainstream adoption strategies from the legacy finance in order to DeFi space to work quicker and more effective?
So I think that's probably a good question for Barbara, but I'll just kind of add my 2 sentences. I think it just comes down to branding and not being too technical with your branding, and just with your messaging being a little bit more using layman's terms. Just no one really cares about the technology behind it. I mean, in the community, obviously we do, but to the everyday person, it's not really the technology that interests people. It's what their return is going to be. So it really comes down to creating the messaging both compelling and creates a clear understanding that there's something in it for them that isn't completely reliant on cool technology.
I think you said that well, Musa. I don't have to add anything else to that. It comes down to what real problem are you solving in the end. I mean, in the end, this is all about that. So, you know, as long as you're clear on the problem you're solving. So in our case, why are we making a blockchain carbon registry? For what Doug said, full transparency. How do you really know that you purchased that carbon offset? How do you know when that offset got retired? How do you know where that offset went? Full transparency. That's why we're doing it. So, I mean, it's solving a problem. And that's why you use any technology. Why do you put things in the cloud? It's solving a problem. Why do you code certain things versus buy certain things? You're solving a problem. And so in the end, that's what all of this is about. So if you can apply DeFi concepts from bankers or other regulators or other people, then we should look at that. But then we also should be evolving business models, revenue models, and things of that nature as well. Because, having a blockchain and then just having our same type of models doesn't make sense to me from a business side.
In answer to your question about what we can learn about traditional financial models and apply to blockchain, I think it's helpful to realize that it's not a black and white divide, right? The old traditional banking systems aren't totally centralized and blockchains aren't totally decentralized. So, for example, when you write a check from your bank and then it's cashed, and you write it for someone else who cashes it at a separate bank, there needs to be a decentralized settlement layer, right? So even interbank commerce has a decentralized settlement layer, and it's overseen by higher level institutions, like, for example, the government and insurance companies and underwriters and so forth. But it's the same in the blockchain, right? You have decentralization at a certain layer, but above that, there's, for example, the Ethereum protocol, right? Which is, let's be honest here, has its centralization aspects, right? If the core developers want to change some part of the protocol, they easily can, right? I mean, depending on how you define easy. But the thing is that it's not a black and white spectrum. And all of these advances we see in decentralized finance, almost all of them have analogs in the previous financial system. They're just slightly tweaked, in my opinion. Like even things like flash loans that are regarded as very innovative have their counterparts in traditional finance, right? For example, if you cash a check, if you write a check, you can write it for more than you have in your bank account, and you can pass it and have it cashed. But you need to make sure that at the end of the day, you top up your bank with the amount of funds, right? It's exactly the same as a flash loan, right? So I think there's a lot of things that can be borrowed, but we have to really look at the prior art, so to speak.
Wonderful. Okay, my last question to you guys will be based on the Make a DAO quote from the previous panel. So he talked about serving the real world. So you, as representatives of the real world, what would really be the best, the most important, the most longed, desired, and also surprising application, mainstream, or maybe only your personal application in the DeFi space, let's say within the next 5 years? Musa, let's start with you.
I think it's creating a clear transition away from traditional institutions, like becoming, again, the anti-bank. And making it easy for people to do that also is the key here. If they have to jump hurdles, like having to reset your password on Coinbase is like a full-time job. So just as an example.
Wonderful. Anti-banks. Barbara.
I have two sayings. I always say trust is the new currency. So really, I think this ecosystem we're creating is really more about who are we trusting? Are we trusting each other? You know, are we going to still trust some of these other entities? And that's kind of what Musa's saying. Hey, I'm the anti-bank. So, you know, a lot of people don't trust banks. So I think some of it's going to come down to that. And then I always also say, this is another one I have, Musa, you are your own bank. So that comes down to your personal responsibility. So I think all of these kind of blockchain, DeFi, DAO conversations really need to think about, like, how do people have a personal responsibility and take care of, you know, what that means for them. And that, again, comes down to what problems are you solving for them. Like, if I can pay my utility bill with a coin, that'd be great. But if I can also wire money across the world, that would be great as well. If I could travel and use that money anywhere, that would be great. So you have to, you know, it's kind of like almost a personalized thing, because how do you really operate with money? In the end, this is what we're asking people to think about.
Great thoughts. Doug, what about you?
I would like to see all the protocols that people use have what I would like to think of as an escape valve, right? Because with most centralized systems right now, like let's take Google Mail, Gmail, for example, all the users are locked in essentially, right? It's a very, very high switching cost to move to another mail provider. You have to change your address and, you know, figure out how to migrate your mail. I would like to see blockchains put pressure onto centralized services to force them to add escape valves, right? So that users can more easily move between different applications. In our particular field of sports betting, everything is very siloed, right? When you have your money in one particular account, it's, you know, often very difficult to get them to honor their obligations, and to, you know, very expensive, and takes a long time to move your funds out. I really believe blockchain is going to force escape valves into this industry and many other industries to, you know, really give users a chance to move their data and funds and identities more portably. So that's what I like. That's my hope for blockchains.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. That was a pleasure to talk to you. It was so quick that I haven't yet had time to follow. So please all stay safe, decentralized, and even if you don't trust, verify.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.